Welcome to Swiftly Spoken, a fan-made Taylor Swift podcast in which we break down her lyrics, deep dive into full album retrospectives, and theorise about what may be coming next. We are your hosts, Cameron and Lisa, and in the wake of Speak Now Taylor's version, we're revisiting our Speak Now story series by discussing Taylor's inspirations and hidden secrets behind the songs on her third studio album. We're going to be dividing this task into 3 episodes released over the next month and a half as a way to celebrate and count down to Speak Now Taylor's version. In each episode, we're going to be breaking down the songs from a chronological perspective of the order in which it seems most likely that Taylor originally wrote them. We also wanted to give some credits before we start off to the Tumblr user Taylor on Your Dash for compiling the sources related to Speak Now chronologically.
Speak Now is a very personal and diaristic album, and almost every song seems to link to very specific events that Taylor lived through in her personal or professional life. It was made intimately between Taylor and Nathan Chapman, and as described in the Lover journals, she was constantly writing and then travelling to Nathan's home studio to record.
The first song written, which technically wasn't written for Speak Now, but the first song that ended up on Speak Now that was written was Sparks Fly, which was written back in 2006. For more information on this song, go and see our episode in which we decipher the original lyrics, all of the changes this song went through, and also we go through the touching story of how the song almost didn't make it at all, and ultimately it all came full cycle, and it was the last song that Taylor included and added onto the album before it was kind of like put out into the world. But it has a really nice story behind it, and we had a lot of fun deciphering those lyrics, going through like the original versions in that episode. So if you are interested in knowing more about this specific song, go check out its specifically dedicated episode.
So kicking off into the main bulk of the kind of Speak Now writing, so there are a handful of songs written early on in mid-2009 that are rumoured to be about Joe Jonas, and these are the initial songs that were written for Speak Now. So the first of these songs is Haunted. So Haunted seems to echo many of the kind of doubts of Forever and Always, but in a much more kind of depressive and slightly less angry tone. Interestingly, when discussing Haunted, it's important to kind of mention the secret message that was included in the CD booklets. So Haunted's secret message is still to this day, and this links back to a quote that Taylor said about this song in the Speak Now track by track video. And basically Taylor's quote is that it's about the moment that you realise that the person you're in love with is drifting and fading fast and you don't know what to do. But in that period of time, in that phase of love where it's fading out, time goes by so slowly. Everything hinges on what that last text message said, and you're realising that he's kind of falling out of love. That's a really heartbreaking and tragic thing to go through, because the whole time you're trying to tell yourself it's not happening. I went through this, and I ended up waking up in the middle of the night writing this song about it. What's quite interesting is obviously this is still a kind of Taylor waking up in the middle of the night and writing a song is obviously something that is still a very kind of key aspect of Taylor's songwriting, with obviously the release of Midnights, which is quite interesting. But going back onto Haunted, what's your kind of feelings about Haunted, its message, when it was written, all of the above?
Yeah, so Haunted is, again, when we're talking about these songs and who the muse may have been or may not have been, we got to always take it with a grain of salt unless it's like completely confirmed by Taylor. We are also just giving our opinions. You know, nothing is set in stone. But it does seem like what you mentioned, it is kind of the version of Forever and Always, which, bear in mind, Forever and Always was the last song added quickly to Fearless before that was put out. And this seems like the continuation of it. But did you forget everything in Forever and Always and back up? And Haunted is just like the sad version of that. Like,
yeah,
I know you're not gone, you can't be gone, but unfortunately, they're gone. And yeah, that's such an interesting thing that you pointed out there, the middle of the night. It's so typical in Taylor, and it's continued still to this day, just like the secret message.
Exactly, and Taylor kind of summarises it perfectly about what this kind of song is about. But it's so funny that something that is such a kind of common thing of like everything hinges on what like the last text message said, but then it's turned into this like gorgeously metaphorical and like fairy tale-esque, because Haunted does, even though obviously it's a kind of a sad, like,
it is
doubtful song, it still has like that kind of fairy tale feel to it, which is so funny that it's literally about like waiting for a text message, you know what I mean? Which is so like mundane in comparison to Haunted, which is just so fairy tale and theatrical and dramatic. So I just love that Taylor again just turns such a like normal feeling, really, of feeling like you're falling out of love with someone and that is kind of fading away, into something that is just so poetic. And I love Haunted. It is one of my favourites.
It also had a second life, really, during tour, when the production of it, I know a lot of people really, really enjoy that version with the bell, which became another iconic piece of imagery from the Speak Now era. So I think that's an interesting thing to add as well. I have to say personally that Haunted is not one of my favourites from Speak Now. I don't know why.
Really?
It's never been my favourite from Speak Now, but I guess it's up against some big, big competition as we're going to be seeing. Definitely. As we get into these songs. Yeah, no, I definitely love that it did have that big moment on tour, and I cannot wait to hear it again for the first time. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I can't wait. There's so many songs. Well, to be fair, the majority of Speak Now, I can't wait
all
for
of
Taylor's
it, really,
version.
but yeah.
And Haunted is so exciting. Haunted is exciting. I really, really, really hope that it has that kind of big grand production, and hopefully Taylor's vocals are just going to absolutely kill it. So yeah, fingers crossed. I'm excited about that one too.
Moving on, next up, we have quite a controversial song, the most debated song out of all of Speak Now, which of course is Better Than Revenge. We've spoken about this song time and time again. I think it's a big, big thing and a big talking piece when it comes to this album. So again, this song represented Taylor's more of the anger side of things, inspired a lot by the Jonas Brothers song Much Better, which it directly quotes, which is so, so interesting. This is one of the times where Taylor, I love when she does that. I love when she takes other artists' songs that may be about her or maybe not, but she felt called out or she felt like she wanted to mention that one in specific. She sometimes does it with also writing and literature in some of her latter songs, but in these ones where she literally quotes the direct moment of that song, love that. The hidden message is, you thought I would forget, but she did not forget. And when talking about this song, Taylor mentioned that it's about a girl who a few years ago stole my boyfriend. I think she probably thought I forgot about it, but I didn't. When we talk about Better Than Revenge, how do you feel about it? We have spoken about this before and about her changing it or not changing it. But in light of recent events and with Speak Now coming really, really fast, Taylor's version, how are you feeling about this song now more than ever?
I just love Better Than Revenge. I know it might be controversial, but I just love it. It's such a like maybe not some of its messaging, but just it as a song. And yeah, I'm excited to hear it. Like generally, I'm really excited to hear it and hear Taylor's new vocals on it. And yeah, and it is, you know, it isn't great, that, but realistically, it's only I think that it's that one line that makes it, you know,
yeah,
gives
the
it
overall
the
sentiment, it's been echoed in songs throughout history because it's that horrible feeling of feeling pushed away or rejected,
betrayal,
and being replaced by someone different.
Yeah.
And she has broached that
I think
theme many times.
Mr. Perfectly Fine is a really good example. Good For You by Olivia Rodrigo.
Yeah, You're Happy and Healthy with someone else. Yeah.
Yeah, Deja Vu by Olivia Rodrigo. But it just doesn't have that same...
That line is bad, it's bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting is the recent Rolling Stone article, and I think they really perfectly kind of said, like, I don't know, they just really perfectly kind of worded why it wouldn't be sensible to change it. And basically they kind of said that changing the past for Speak Now Taylor's version or using it to make some kind of grand feminist statement would not only feel dishonest, but it would compromise her goal of devaluing her old records. And I think that that is a really kind of concise and just good way of kind of describing it, that it would come across, I don't think it would come across as like, oh, this is really good. It would just come across as cheap.
Revisionist.
It would just come across as really cheap and just not, I don't know, I just think, and also it would totally then defeat the whole element
of course
of the Taylor's versions. But then you could very much say, well, Girl at Home
exactly
is a perfect example.
This is true.
Not the original. And every so often I do, obviously I bought them on iTunes and I listen to them on my phone, and they're, you know, I'm not streaming it at all. But every so often I do go back to the original Girl at Home because I'm just like, oh yeah, I wonder what that sounds like again. Because it is just so different. So I'll listen to the Taylor's version and be like, oh, let's compare it to the original again. So I feel like if you do change, so it's like if she does do that, then Better Than Revenge, realistically, the original will still have some sort of listenership, because people will go back and be like, oh yeah, like, what's different, or this
Well,
is,
especially in that moment,
and it makes it
exactly. If
then
we have a
clickbaity.
change, you're like, well, what changed and why did it change and what's the story behind it? And so,
and then there'll be
unfortunately,
articles about it, and more people are like going to go out of their way to see why it changed and what the original was. Whereas I think it's like the Barbra Streisand effect. I think we mentioned before that it's like, if she just releases it, then there's no difference. Whereas I think you'd only give Better Than Revenge more attention if you changed it, because it'd be like, oh, what was the original like then that was so bad? So I don't know. I think we shall see how it rolls out. I think whatever way Taylor goes about it, she clearly thinks is the best way. Rocky Taylor, we don't really get enough of it. You know, slightly like punky pop, Paramore-y Taylor, basically. I just don't think we get enough of. So other than really Eyes Open, Better Than Revenge, there are a couple here and there. So I'm quite excited for it.
Yeah, whatever happens, it will be very interesting to see the outcome and also to comment about the, what happens after it is released.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, and what is interesting is that with the Taylor's versions, Taylor is rewriting elements of her
there are things that are revisionist in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Like Girl at Home. This was a movie, obviously.
Yeah.
And obviously adding the vault tracks that's just a prime example of that totally changes up the album. Or even, for example, putting, like an album like Red, which was not an explicit album, now the Taylor's version is explicit.
Yeah.
So that there is elements of that. So it'd be intriguing how much she chooses to do that, and whether the kind of negative, maybe controversial association to Better Than Revenge is enough to warrant changing it. But we shall see. But it's still interesting to kind of discuss the realm of Speak Now and when it was written, and the fact it was written around a song like Haunted is quite interesting, that they were kind of some of the earlier Speak Now tracks. So the next track is If This Was a Movie, and we've recently been speaking a lot about this one, as obviously it has now been taken off of Speak Now, and if you've seen our recent episodes, you'll know how we feel about this, especially myself. But this was a track that's always kind of stuck out to fans for being the only co-write, and it was obviously written with Martin Johnson from Boys Like Girls. So yeah, If This Movie, I feel like we've kind of got into quite a lot, but there's not really that much that Taylor's really ever said about the track. There's not a hidden message. There are a couple of fake ones out there, but there's no official kind of hidden message, and Taylor's never really outright said, unlike the previous two tracks, this track is about this. But obviously now it has a new home on Fearless, Taylor's version. But yeah, If This Was a Movie was the kind of next one in the or appears to be the next song kind of written in the chronology of writing Speak Now.
Yeah, around that time, and it makes sense because it is also, 6 months gone, so it obviously was 6 months after the whole thing, the whole relationship.
Yeah.
And it is just a nice, wistful, sad song about the ending. What about the ending? Well, there really wasn't one.
Exactly.
It just came to an abrupt close.
Exactly. Yeah, I think what's quite interesting is about these three songs so far is maybe the juvenile element to them. Obviously, they were the first ones written, and you've got like
carrying on
If This Was a Movie, which the Fearless kind of world, yeah. And I think what's interesting about If This Was a Movie, that obviously it was a co-write, so this was clearly before she decided to make Speak Now or decide to write solo. Obviously, Better Than Revenge obviously does have quite a youthful look on that situation, and maybe not a wiser, more nuanced look on it. And then even Haunted, turning something kind of so simple into something quite dramatic and theatrical, is maybe something that's slightly juvenile. So I do think that's quite interesting with these first three, is that there's an element of maybe her not knowing where the album is going. And obviously, if these were written like early mid-2009, songs like Mr. Perfectly Fine were actually written like later.
Yeah, that is something that's very, very funny
on Fearless.
to know. Yeah, you're completely right. This is something that we spoke about when we went in and deep dived the Fearless Vault, and we spoke about when they were supposedly written or at what point. And it was interesting to see the big crossover between the end of Fearless and platinum version of Fearless and Speak Now. And now, obviously, Fearless Taylor's version and whatever we see on Speak Now Taylor's version, there is so much crossover. And I think we'll find the same thing happening, obviously, for Debut, whenever that becomes a re-recorded album as well. Because as we know, there's some songs on that Fearless Vault that really can be dated back to, and obviously, Sparks Fly is the perfect example.
Yeah, exactly.
Of this.
These three do seem to
crossover.
Kind of be quite, and I've always distinguished Taylor albums like that. To be fair, I've always seen them in pairs of three. Like for me,
Right.
I see the first three. I see Red to Reputation.
Oh God, what a
Red
big
to
change
Red to
between the three,
Reputation is
though.
kind of one exactly, but I still see them as kind of one
Okay.
because like Red merges into 1989, and obviously what happened with 1989 is literally Reputation is a direct reflection of.
Mm.
And then I see like Lover, Folklore, and Evermore as a three. But then weirdly, part of me sees the first three. I could actually argue I see the first three. So Debut to Speak Now. Then maybe I see Red 1989. And then I think maybe Reputation, Lover.
Yeah, I
And
agree
then
with that.
Folklore,
Then
Evermore,
Folklore Evermore,
Midnights.
and then Taylor's
Midnights
versions
is
and Midnights. Or
Taylor's
like,
versions, Midnights. Yeah,
yeah,
actually, that's true. Actually, I might see it more like that. Thinking about it,
yeah, I agree with you
see
there.
them as almost like a 3, 2, 2,
Two,
2, and then 3.
yeah, and then here we are. Yeah, definitely,
Mm.
definitely. The last song in these batch of songs that we're going to be talking about wasn't technically written right at this point, but we've shoved it in together because we have a entire episode in which we break this song down, like from the beginning to the ending, just because it's such a beautifully written song. It has such a specific message behind it. It has created an entire special day which Swifties celebrate year in, year out. And that song is, of course, Last Kiss. It really is a lovely song. Well, it's very deeply
Oh yeah,
sad, but it
and what's
is.
interesting is obviously,
Mm.
obviously it's that holiday, so say the
Mm.
Swifty holiday of July 9th has now obviously impacted the re-release of Speak Now because it's now being released on July 7th, so that
Yep.
it can be released before July 9th. So Last Kiss
Yep.
is such a like fundamental song to that album, and now its re-recorded version, which is
I
really
feel
interesting.
vindicated once again. I think I've said this before, but
Yes.
I called for that for years on end, and here we are. And
Mm.
so I'm so happy. But yeah, that's the first time that Taylor has actually really taken notice of
Acknowledged that.
yeah, acknowledged and taken
Yeah.
note of it and said, yeah, July 9th, if you know, you know. We do know.
Yeah.
We've been banging on about it for years. I think the only thing that we can really talk about here, which again, even this we spoke about before in our Speak Now, Taylor's version, we recorded what we expected from, that album, but Shaky Breath, she's got to do it.
Yes, I hope so. I've seen a lot on TikTok
I'm
recently
scared.
about it, where everyone's like,
I
"We
know.
need that shaky breath." But I think she listens, Taylor listens, and she knows what we want. So hopefully, she'll be on it.
Yeah, let's hope so, because I don't know why, but it's just such a raw moment in the album that really shows like she was going through it for that song. And isn't that crazy to
Yeah,
think that she really feels things deeply, because that technically the song was recorded a long time after the entire thing had gone down. And it's funny
yeah,
to see these songs in this kind of all batch together, supposedly all about this same person, again supposedly, but it does go through like the stages of anger and regret and denial and sadness, and then
yeah.
just like deeply deeply thinking about it and being really really sad that I didn't expect it to end like this. They all have the common theme though of things abruptly ending, not realizing, and
Yes.
then suddenly being like, oh, it's the end.
So the next song, kind of written for Speak Now, was "Never Grow Up," and basically the kind of backstory behind this song is that in July of 2009, Taylor moved out of her family home, inspiring her obviously to write "Never Grow Up." And interestingly, the secret message perfectly kind of reflects this because it says, "I moved out in July." And Taylor herself said that "Never Grow Up" is a song about the fact that I don't quite know how I feel about growing up. It's tricky. Growing up happens without you knowing it. Growing up is such a crazy concept because a lot of times when you're younger, you wish you were older. I look out into a crowd every night and I see a lot of girls that are my age and going through exactly the same things as I'm going through. Every once in a while, I look down and I see a little girl who is 7 or 8, and I wish I could tell her all of this. There she is, becoming who she is going to be, and formatting her thoughts and dreams and opinions. I wrote this song for those little girls.
Oh.
Which I think is just really sweet. I've always loved Never Grow Up. For me, and I mean this in the nicest way possible,
Mm.
it is a skip because I can't get through it because it's so emotional
Right.
and I just find it so sad.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't listen to it. It's not one that I really listen to, but it is such a gorgeous song. And it perfectly describes that feeling of, like, I'll never forget when I kind of moved out first and went to uni and stuff. The second I was left alone in my room, the first thing I did was like, I'm putting Never Grow Up on because I'm going to really hurt my feelings and make myself feel really sad because I'm really stupid.
No.
And I think because Never Grow Up does capture that feeling of like, God, I wish I was, 8 years old again or 14 years old again. And
Mm.
if I was that age again, I wouldn't wish that I was 20, 18, however old.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So
When you're
I
that
love
young,
I love Never Grow Up.
you do kind of look towards the future and you can't wait for it and you're so desperate to reach
Mm,
it. And like Taylor says, no, take pictures, remember these moments and appreciate them
exactly.
for what they are.
And
Don't
I think,
be embarrassed about silly things. And it's very hard to say because when you are that age, it is all very awkward and all very ugh. But when you
yeah,
get older, you look back and it is quite nostalgic and you think, oh, I wish
wish
I
I'd
could.
kind of
Yeah.
exactly. There's so many days you just wish you could go back to that. But I think what's really lovely as well about the song is that she basically sings directly to herself as a child, and it's almost like she kind of in the song. I've always kind of pictured her basically like meeting herself as a child and being like, "Just don't grow up, like
Yeah.
just stay how you are, and all will be fine." It's like before you were kind of damaged, and before the world was all really big and scary. And I love Never Grow Up, but unfortunately, it's not one that I go out of my way to listen to because it is just a little bit kind of heavy and a bit emotional. But it is such a good one, and I can't wait to hear kind of Taylor's vocals on it. And obviously it's kind of message now of Taylor, and I'm sure that this song will resonate with her even more now than it did even back then.
With that, we've come to the end of this portion of our series of Speak Now stories. Like we said, if you want to check out our other stories that we already went into great detail for Sparks Fly and Last Kiss, then you can do so. There's a whole playlist up on our YouTube channel in which we add everything to do with stories behind the music of Speak Now and things that we're looking forward to for Taylor's version. It's all there. So if you want to check that out, we do encourage you to do that. And in the next few weeks, we'll be releasing the other two parts in which we talk about some very, very interesting songs from the album, some of my favorites that have really such cool backstories to them, such poignant moments of inspiration, some really sad, some really, really happy ones. In general, Speak Now is just such a fun album to talk about when we look at the diaristic writing because it's so well written that you can literally pinpoint moments and feelings perfectly. And that's what's really, really lovely about it. And that's why it's so magical to revisit. Please join us for those episodes as they will be coming very soon. And for now, you can follow us over on Instagram, which is at Swiftly Spoken Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a thumbs up and leave a comment telling us which one is your favorite song out of this batch of Speak Now songs. And finally, if you are listening over on Spotify or Apple Music, thank you very much for listening and leave us rate us, and let us know if you enjoy the podcast.